Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another tying session of golden rods and reels from beautiful and sunny Victoria, British Columbia. Today I'm going to do, as listed in the post, three different patterns. Well, three flies, two patterns, three flies. The first two are just closer minnows in a smaller size. So these are size 8 and 10 hooks. The hooks themselves are about an inch long. So depending on what hook you want to use for this, as long as it's a bit of a heavier wire, these are intended for salmon in a stream. So you want a little bit of a heavier wire hook so you don't have nasty surprises. Now this fly is pretty standard tie. The only thing about it is that it's using polar bear, which is a wonderful material if you have it. And it's a white and pink. That's pattern number one. And the second pattern is going to be a white and purple. So standard tying techniques, I'm just using some hot pink threads to match with the pink tone of the fly. And bring the thread back behind the eye of the hook, about 2 eye lengths, and build a little bit of a thread bump there against which I'm going to tie the eyes on. And for eyes, I'm going to use on the larger hooks, I use these eyes with pupils. On the smaller hooks, I have some plain dumbbell, I have some plain dumbbell eyes, okay? There's a pair of eyes that's a little reluctant, so let's wind back here. I try to do this without glue, so you will see me struggle a little bit. It's the first couple of wraps where you get this tied against the bump that can be a little more challenging. Once that's done, this gets tied in pretty firmly. So just turn around if you can, if your vise allows it. Turn this around so you can see it from a better angle. You get to see better your cross wraps. And because this is a little bit thinner thread, I'm going to have to do a few more wraps here. So once you get to a point where you can't move the eyes on the hook, it's all good. All right. Now I'm going to tie in the white stuff. And I'm realizing the way I normally tie these things, I've been a little too enthusiastic, but let's continue. So polar bear, first thing that goes on top of the fly here is the white stuff, because what you want is the white on the bottom of the fly, and this fish is upside down. Okay, so take the polar bear. This is fairly short hair you need here because this is a fairly short fly. And take a little clump, and this is a little bit hard to estimate. You don't want this fly to be too bulky. Trying to tie this sparse. So take whatever hair you think and then think again and drop some of the hair before you cut it off the hide. No wasting with polar bear. This is not exactly an abundant fly tying material. Okay.
Is it easy to get on the island?
I was able to get some a couple of years ago. There was this shop that was getting out of the selling materials. business. I haven't tried the local suppliers like Robinson's would be the only place to try. There are a few places on the mainland, they seem to be perpetually out of stock. So I don't think it's necessarily easier to get. Okay, so
Teddy's tackle
Teddy's
has,
tackle, yeah, that's where I got some hair from.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still sell it.
yeah, they had green garbage bags full of white and dyed. Still
Yeah.
do. They're up in Chemainus, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, what if they got it all from Superfly when Superfly went out?
I have no idea. So what I'm doing with this is I'm measuring the wing. So normally the wing on a streamer like this would be about this long, but I'm going to add a little bit of length here. The reason being that once you pull this hair above the eyes here, you're going to lose some of that length. So to end up with the correct length, you have to make this hair a little longer than you would normally do. And again, this is fairly slippery material. So what I'm going to do is just a couple of turns here, just so I get the hair in place and the thread in place. And then I'm going to secure the hair nicely in front of the eyes. Okay, obviously this is not going to stay like this. Just going to trim it here. And so this is going to be the head of the fly. It's going to be all covered in thread. And now I move the thread behind the eyes and secure this white hair nicely on the shank of the hook. And then I go back and do a few more thread wraps. And the purpose of these thread wraps is to really just cover up the portion of hair that's over the eyes here, to have that visible hot spot. Okay, this is for the white hair. Now I'll put that white hair away and get a little bit of crystal flash, not much. Depending on what flash material you use, you may want to use more or less. If I use this kind of standard crinkly, fairly stiff crystal flash, one strand of this folded a few times is more than enough. If I use something else like this polar flash, this is a little bit more discreet, a little bit softer. You can use 2-3 strands of this folded, and you get a much more discreet effect. I'm just going to use the crystal flash, which is the more common material. And all I'm doing is I just fold it. These are fairly long strands. I take it and fold it twice, so I end up with 4 strands of material. And then the end result is going to be I take this and fold it one last time and create a little loop here and slip that over the shank and tie it down in front of the eye. Okay. And this is about the right length, so I don't even need any further trimming. Okay, and for the finishing touch, I'm going to take, once I take this out of the vise, I find that this is still a bit too long, I can always trim that. Now for the wing, I'm just going to use some hot pink polar bear. This is indeed from Teddy's tackle. It's not the best quality polar bear in the sense that, you know, the hair is kind of curly and not from the best pieces of bear hide. And again, when picking the hair, just
Okay, babe.
resist the temptation to get too much hair. So take the hair, get the under fur out. Actually, what I'm doing with the under fur is I'm saving it as dubbing. And here, if the hairs are too uneven, what I'm doing is I'm just going to hand stack it a little bit, which is simply grab the tips and pull them together so that they are a bit more of an even length. Now the length of the wing is going to be the true length now because I'm no longer tying it down over the eyes. And you want to, this is pretty wiry. You want to trim this to the length you're actually going to tie on before you tie it in, so you don't have to. It's pretty hard to do this trimming after the fact. So get a, oops, I got my thread tangled up in the eyes, I guess. Hold this down at an angle here. And sometimes the trick you can do is you can put the hair a bit forward. Just do 1 or 2 not very tight loops. Then pull the hair back under those first 2 wraps. And then finish with proper tight wraps. And don't let go of the hair until you've done a few good wraps here, which is basically finishing off the head of the fly. And there's the wing right there. Then give the thread a little bit of an untwist. Just spin the bobbin. This is gonna give you a nicer finish. Still have tiny little bits of hair still sticking out here. Anyway, so untwisting the thread before the whip finish will give you a neater, flatter whip finish. This is even more important if you use thicker thread. The whip finishes and then, and that's the fly. And the only, you can see here, this is the beauty of tying under a camera with magnification. You can see the little defects that are going to make this a non-fish catching fly, because the fish can see better than this camera. Yeah. Okay. And for the very, very final step, of course, you need magic juice. You know, the secret ingredient, right? Take a bit of magic juice and cover up the, I like to give a good coating to the threads that are basically going to be dragging potentially along the bottom. So on top of the eyes, as the fly sits in the vise. Give it a little spin. That'll have let that magic juice flow a little bit and settle in uniformly. And now, of course, I don't want to get that on my fingers and ruin the finish. So I'm just going to get an electronics clip, grab the hook before I take it out of the vise. And this goes out to dry. Okay. The other color that was in my member box was a white and purple combination, similar size. Some of them were actually tied a little smaller. So I decided I'm going to do these on, I'm going to try 2 different sizes of hooks. So this is a small variation of that same pattern. And I'm going to tie it a little bit more quickly without all the extra explanations. But just a slightly smaller hook. I change thread color to white.
So what colors do you tie it in for salmon steelhead?
Well, the here's the thing. I am just learning the ropes, so to speak, in terms of fishing for these other species. And I have basically zero experience. So me tying these things is kind of weird at some level. But with golden rods and reels, as a new member, you get a box of flies. And the box of flies that I got was tied by a member here, Dale, who is, from what I can gather, quite a heck of a fisherman and is a pretty good fly tyer too. And so I took this little fly box that has two sides, one labeled trout and the other one labeled Souk River. And the one labeled Souk River means salmon. And I'm working to tie the patterns that are in that fly box. It's very nice. It's a very nice fly box. It's not very big, but it has one fly of each kind. So there's no duplication there other than, you know, possibly slightly different colors, like in this case with the clousers. So let's get another little bit of the white hair. Take out the white underfur. It's beautiful stuff. It's very soft. It's a much nicer. Once I have enough saved, I'm going to tie a bunch of flies that would call normally for seal fur dubbing, and I'm just gonna use polar bear instead. So again, same trick, measure the wing. And the hair, and this is where some of the difficulty occurs because there's always a little bit of stray hair. You have a fairly limited space here at the nose of the fly. Okay, so this is attached now. I'm gonna turn it around so I have that top where I'm gonna figure eight the hair in place. Right there. And then secure it behind the eyes. Well, let's just try a different thing here for the flash. I'm gonna take this is this polar flash thing. You can get Krelex in pearl as well. That would be a nice thing to use. You can see this is a fair bit finer. Just falls apart a little bit. It has the flash material is put together with some kind of a fine reinforcing thread. There you go. It's not as blindingly obvious as the other guy was. Cut it here. Okay, this is a fairly thick bundle, so I'm not going to fold it too many times. And again, hook it here over the shank. Pull it in. And this one needs a little trimming because it's a little too long. About here. Okay. So now we have our flash in, and I have somewhere here the purple bear. Very rare variety of bear that's only ever seen on Vancouver Island. And only under certain conditions. The tide and the moon have to be just right for these bears to come out. But when you get one of these purple bears, oh, yeah. Amazing fur.
I had a girl that worked for me. Her dad was a teacher in Edmonton. And he used to hunt up, it was north of Whitecourt. I forget the area he hunted. And he shot a black bear that was purple. It looked like, you remember how you see older ladies with, they dye their hair black and it, you look at it in the sun and it's purple, like it's a bad dye job. That's what this black bear looked like.
Yeah, I guess there are variations where the pigmentation of the the animal doesn't produce a particular pigment. There are these grayish, almost white, very light gray magpies you see sometimes in the city in Edmonton.
Yeah,
and,
I've seen those.
They're not true albinos. They're simply lacking some of the black pigment, and they're actually very beautiful birds. And if you're used to seeing the standard magpie, you run into one of those and you go like, what was that? Yeah,
Something like that. Can you see that, Florin?
yeah, I think that's the correct purple bear color. You've got it.
Yeah, the rare species.
Yeah, well, it's rare, but obviously the right people have the right colors here. Okay. So as you can see here, I probably could have left a little bit more of a nose on this fly. Finish. Two-whip finish is trim, magic juice, done. This one, okay, I'm gonna try to clean up a little bit this. It's not perfect, but will do. Okay, so right on top of the thread on the eyes, and a little bit here at the nose. Okay, so that's a slightly smaller version of the same fly. Same thing, so I don't have to grab onto the part where I put the magic juice. Go. There's the completed fly. And set aside to dry. The final fly of the set I'm going to do today is a egg cluster, I presume, which is tied effectively as a two-tone blob. Okay, if you think blobs are hideous, this is triple hideous. So let's do this one. Take a hook. And notice that these are somewhat longer shank hooks.
What's the hook you're using?
Oh, it's one of those whatever generic hooks from Trout Bum.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like, you know, for me the standard hook, because this is what I learned to tie with, is the Mastad. So I'd say proportions on this are more like a 3906B. I think the longer 3906. So it's a little, if you look at the relative proportions to the gap of the hook, I think they're a little shorter shanked than a standard 9671. So I think I would say around the 3906B, which is the longer 3906.
Okay.
But it's a slightly heavier wire than the Mastads I was referring to earlier, and it's much longer shanked than the heavy wire Mastad, which would be the 3399, I think. Anyway, this is just gonna use standard. The sample fly, in fact, that I got was tied on a up eye black salmon hook.
Mhm.
So I was just mimicking. I was just trying to match the shank length, and the gap of the hook is about the same, maybe a little bit bigger, which I find easier to deal with when a fish gets hooked, because a wider gap hook is always easier to take out of a fish than the little ones. Okay, so here I have to start at the back. So just put thread on the shank, and then I'm going to use 2 colors of Fritz. So this is, I don't have exactly the yellow that came on the sample pattern, so I'm just going to use this fluorescent chartreuse Fritz. And then for the rest of the body, I think I have the exact match for the material used there, which is this bicolor thing, the tiger blind, so-called. Okay, so with Fritz, what you want is you want to secure this properly to the hook without creating a big bulge. So take a little bit of Fritz, just like with chenille, and strip, you know, some of the core. Then I'm gonna tie this here, right. I'm basically right in the bend of the hook there. These are barbless hooks, but it's effectively the point where the barb would have been had this been a barbed hook. And move the thread forward a little bit and start. This is going to be more difficult part of the tying, because what you want is you want this to be nicely lined up to the back. So it may need a little bit of coaxing here in place. The Fritz fibers are reasonably well aligned. It's just that you need to make sure that the core is not twisted too much when you wrap this on. And then if the core is in the right position, it's easy to wrap this on like a properly lying, like a wet hackle. So that's the way I think of this, is I'm tying on, it's like when you tie partridge and you pull the fibers back, except that a little moisture with the partridge gets you things behaving pretty well, pretty easy. And this one is a little, it's plastic and it's stiff. And so here is just a little tag or butt of this fluorescent stuff. Make sure you secure this, and then bring the final color. And what I do, rather than cutting pieces, I just keep this in the packet and close essentially the packet over the frets so that it doesn't fall out easily. I can still pull it through, but it just doesn't fall out freely. And this way I can put exactly the amount I need. Those of you who have kept old film canisters might be able to stick the whole lot of it inside the canister, punch a little hole through the lid, and then use that as a container to pull your frets through. So same idea, tie it on by the core, make sure it's
Controlling your frets is very important.
What was that?
I said that controlling your frets is very important.
Oh, for sure.
Super.
Yeah, it'll go crazy otherwise.
So again, what you want is you want these things, and I tried to see if it behaves better if you get it wet. Not really. So just, you know, do the best you can. Keep this, as you can see, as I'm wrapping this, I'm holding it. With the fibers pointing back, so I get them to fall into place nicely. And if I didn't have the document camera here close to the vise, I'd probably use the rotary vise to do this. It does make the life a little bit simpler, except for one fact that when you're using the rotary vise, trying to also fold the frets backwards is difficult. You need a third hand. You need a hand to rotate the vise, one to fold the frets, and one to hold it. So there we go. This consumes a lot of frets. This shank is quite long. Okay, so go closely touching turns. And then when you get to the, leave a little bit of room there to make a head for this fly. And then 2 turns of thread to secure the frets. And don't cut it just off yet. Pull it all back. A couple of turns in front to secure properly. And then find where the fritz is coming out of that mess and cut it nice and close. This is still a tad messy, just sweep back the fibers, fill in that little gap that's always present, it seems, at the eye of the hook. Build a little bit of a head here. This is thicker thread, so kind of I have to be careful. This is Danville's 3/0 thread, which I like to use for bigger flies like this. This is a very nice thread, but it does need a little bit of untwisting at the end here. You don't get an ugly head. Standard procedure again. 2 whip finishes. Now with the magic juice, I have to be much more careful with this fly because I don't want to get it in the frets if I can help it. So to put magic juice on this one, so this is the completed fly now. I'm going to put it in a clip so you can see it better. So it has the bright butt and it has the tiger, whatever, 2-tone thing up front. So what I do with this one is I try to hold it vertically in the clip. pull this fibers back as well as I can. Something like this. And then when I take this lacquer, I just carefully touch here. Probably could do this an awful lot better if I took the time to actually trim the brush to a sharp point. As it is, this is a little bit dried up.
I was just going to mention that one of the ways to be more precise is actually cut the brush, a bunch of the brush fibers down, so you have fewer fibers and have a little more precision.
The other way to be extremely precise, which is what I do, what I would do normally for a fly like this that's got kind of too much fuzz at the head. I have this bodkin that's got you can see it has a bent tip. And if you use this in combination with this time expensive standard head cement,
Yeah.
you can do things quite precisely. You have a very high degree of precision. So for example, here, right, if I had a straight-eyed hook, this would have been a lot easier, right? But because this is not straight-eyed, I can just take this and drip it in there. It's right at the base of that. Okay. And the worst that can happen in this case, because this is a fairly small hook, is I can get a bit of this head cement into the eye, but that can also be remedied. This is a very fine point. You can always do this or use a little bit of a feather stem. So once you've tied with some feathers, whether it's chicken, whatever, marabou, anything, keep the stem. And those make very good eye cleaning devices on flies. Okay, so this was a bigger production than it needs to be, but it just kind of gives you various ideas. And by next time, I should have a little jar of Sally Hansen's with the brush trimmed. So yeah.
Florin,
Yes.
how would you fish this and for what?
Well, you'd better ask Dale this one. But I think he would be fishing this, just drifting it down the current on a sink tip of some kind in the souk for chums.
I know he uses that type of fly in Prospect, trolls it and picks up rainbows.
I would also do something more unorthodox with it, which is go to a place like Prospect, put this fly on, and fish it under a bobber and see what happens. Although for that purpose, I would tie a slightly different version of this fly, which I think I did do at one point in time.
Ron Duncan's favorite fly was a tequila booby, one of his favorite flies. All you have to do is put boobies on the front of it, called a tequila booby. But
I
yeah,
have
that's
some-
good for coho up here in the water.
I have some
That's what I
boobies
wanted.
in what I call Dale's box. And they're on the trout side of the box. But I'll yeah, some booby flies are also on the to-do list here.
Yeah, the tequila booby is a really widely used fly in Saskatchewan, in the lakes up north. Works good for lake trout too.